but like box breathing is something I still do. I have to go on stage. It's like 4 in, hold 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, hold, and then hold 1, 2, 3, 4, and then out 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like,
is it kind of like in Wolf of Wall Street where Matthew McConaughey is like
He's gonna start doing that on the tube when he's meditating over his mantra. That's what you'll hear.
That is definitely not box breathing.
Now we have an intro to the episode.
Welcome back to the Mammify podcast, guys. For this episode, we have Stephanie George, a medical scientist at UCL's Royal Free Medical School. Not only a medic, she has also worked at a cell and gene therapy startup, completed the spring week at a large investment bank in London, and recently interned at a hedge fund. Her interests span biomedical science, investing, and coding. She also claims to make the best paella. We'll explore that later on. Without further ado, welcome Stephanie to the Breaking In podcast.
Welcome.
Great to be here. I'm a huge fan of the podcast. So.
Thank you. Stephanie, you have such an eclectic mix of interests. How is it that you've come to find yourself traversing medicine, biotech, finance all at once?
Yeah, I think I have a little bit of a weird career background, to be honest. I kind of started out with this interest in medicine. We can go more into that later because it was an interesting story. But I found myself leaning more towards the innovation side and basically wanting to be in the center of anything interesting happening in terms of biotechnology. And this kind of grew into other interests as well. And I didn't know a career that you could be positioned in learning a bunch of new things. As someone that's quite nerdy and wanting to gain a lot of interest about different areas. And then I stumbled across learning about finance kind of accidentally. And once I learned about that, I found that in something like investing, you have to form a view of the world, a view of different areas of the world, and take a position on it. So you naturally have to be constantly learning about these things. And for that reason, I found myself coming into that career path.
Stephanie, can we take a step back and talk about, your upbringing, what steps you took to sort of land into the position you're in now? Because people who want to be doctors generally know that they want to be doctors, like quite early on. Did you ever want to be a doctor? Was that the plan growing up? Where did you grow up? Maybe an introduction to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I say, weird story, but I didn't grow up necessarily knowing what I wanted to do. I was quite lost, I would say. I grew up in Spain and then moved to the UK quite young. And I lived in quite a few places growing up as well. I was in France, Spain, Turkey. I lived for a year. And once coming to the UK, I guess I was just not sure what I was doing. And around that time, this isn't a sad story because she got better, but my mom got quite sick. And I realized that I didn't know anything about the human body or why that happens. And I found that I was suddenly obsessed with learning about biology and how disease comes about. And she did get better, but by that time, I'd realized that I wanted to get into medicine. I started out thinking about nutrition, and this is kind of also how my path led into fitness, which is a huge hobby of mine. But after I learned about nutrition, I then found myself learning about things like cell and gene therapy, which has applications in cancer immunotherapies. So you're basically empowering the patient to fight cancer with their own cells, which blew my mind. And so I took access to medicine and completed it in 1 year rather than 2, and thought that I would go into medical school. And then I came across this degree, Medical Innovation and Enterprise at UCL. It was kind of the first year they'd ever done it. It was almost a new made-up degree that is out of the medical school, focuses on subjects in medicine, but also really cool things like cell and gene therapy that I mentioned, but also tissue engineering. And I was fascinated by this. I felt that I was a little bit behind, not wanting to do it my entire life. Like some people, they've always known they wanted to be scientists or in medicine. And so I did feel like I was catching up and trying to learn. And this is also how finance came about, because I was like, okay, how much impact can you have as a doctor? You can maybe see a handful of patients in a week, and it's incredible the amount that you have to learn. And then I thought, okay, being a scientist, you create a therapy. Maybe you're touching a few more patients with that innovation and you're getting that through to them. And then I found this next level of, but if you're investing in biotechs and investing in these therapies, reaching patients, and maybe you're having even more impact. And that's not to say one is more impactful than the other, but this is the kind of way that I started thinking about it.
That's super interesting.
For those that don't know, like myself, what exactly is cell and gene therapy?
So there's many different applications. I mean, it came about really with the discovery of CRISPR, which actually happened in Spain, close to where I was growing up.
Wow.
Scientists discovered there's an amazing pink lake, and there are these salt-loving microbes in that lake. And the scientist was investigating them and came across these repeats, and that came about to be the discovery of CRISPR. And that discovery of CRISPR has had so many applications to basically cutting and pasting into the genome. So if you have a unfavorable disease that's passed through genetically, there's the possibility to go and correct that. But at the same time, if you do it on the cell level, something like cancer, which is basically the immune system not recognizing the disease because it's of the self, it's your own cells. So it can't recognize it as a foreign invader like it would with a virus. And so if you can alter those cells to then detect that cancer, that is what's happening with cancer immunotherapies like CAR T and now TCR, which works solid tumors. You have blood cancers or liquid tumors, and then you have solid tumors, which are the solid masses we think of as cancer. And so if you can edit those cells to detect that in the body, it can track it down almost like a hunter dog, because it's like if you have a policeman looking for a criminal, but the criminal looks just like everyone else out on the streets and never going to find them. That's what's happening in the body when there's cancer. But if you give the policeman a warrant and a picture of the criminal, it can now go and hunt it down and detect it. So it's essentially what you're doing when you're editing cells for cell and gene therapy, particularly with cancer.
It's interesting how it's the story of your mom that kind of inspired you to go down this path. I feel like such few people have like such a deep reason to like pursue something in their career. I mean, for me, mine is pretty straightforward and simple. It's like my parents are both doctors. My brother's a doctor. My sister's starting to be a doctor. So the natural path would have been go ahead, be a doctor. That's like what the family's doing. But for me, I just started investing quite young and got really, really interested in it. And I ended up dropping my medicine-y subjects and doing more economics and stuff like that. But like having such a deep-rooted meaning and cause behind like what you do, I think is super important. What do you think sort of the ultimate mission is for you, like following this path? Is it to like empower companies to like change the world? And is that the overall mission?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's quite funny when you say about your family's background. I mean, my mom is actually a spiritual healer. So it's so far from science and the medical realm. But she taught me a lot in terms of thinking about things with visualization. And she's an incredible person in that sense, but it's not very scientific. And so I guess I kind of took both of these interests, even though they're polar opposites, some would say, and just got really curious about how you apply science into actually, whether it's reaching a patient or my interest grew in it, thinking about how can something like nuclear energy help with problems in the world that people talk a lot about and get very fearful of. But once you take a scientific approach, you can kind of think about how to make actual change rather than a lot of talking about what the problems are. We know what the problems are. So if you can find a career path that lets you have some impact on them, then that's my ultimate dream. I think many people's ultimate dreams. And I guess investing is just one step towards that, because you start to focus on where you think it's important and where you think resources should be channeled towards to solve real problems. And you get to spend your days researching, looking into that and coming up with decisions. And you find out instantly if you're right or wrong.
Super interesting.
You've traveled around quite a bit, and we spoke earlier about your wide array of interests. Do you think there's a parallel there between having lived in so many different places and having so many different interests?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we were speaking before about having quite a few different areas of interest, whether it be in sports or nerdy interests, and I think all of us here are like that. I mean, from knowing you guys for a while, I think that it is a really special thing when you just kind of open yourself up to learning new stuff, not being fearful that you necessarily didn't have an upbringing focusing on sports, for example. Didn't come from a sporty background whatsoever. So having growing up in different places, maybe, but I think it only came about in the last couple of years. And I would think a lot about as the kind of person that I wanted to be. And then I would go, okay, well, I want to join the rowing team. And so I went to first year of university, tried that out. And, that happened with everything. And, I think probably more than anything, university brought that out of me, more than traveling even.
Wow. What was it like managing rowing and applications as well back in the day? How did you sort of balance out? And I really do want to sort of dive into the university part. So the podcast mainly is for people that are trying to figure out what they want to do. Maybe they're in school, maybe they're in sixth form and they're like, what subjects should I do for my A-levels? What do I want to do? Or maybe they're in first year of university and they're in that whole spring week season and you're super overwhelmed. And I think you can give some good advice there. And you're like, oh, where should I apply? I've sent out 20 applications, gotten 20 rejections. What do I do now? And you're in the summer internship stage where you're either applying for summer internships or you're walking into one now. I really need to convert this. How do I impress? How do I beat out the competition? Or you're in your career, like some of us, and you're just like, okay, I'm here now. What should my next move be? How do I think about the next few years of my life? So that's, I guess, the audience in the different stages where everyone is. But I think what's super beneficial is to kind of hear your story throughout, okay, you enter university and you're in sort of medical innovation. Everyone around you has an idea of, joining medical innovation, and that's kind of the career landscape that everyone's looking at. And then you get somewhere along the way, you get some kind of exposure to this other world. Could you talk us through what your first year of university and this process looked like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, first of all, looking back at that time, the one piece of advice I would have given myself is there is a big difference between wanting to do something and wanting to be seen doing something because you think it's the right thing to do. And I think this is a trap that you fall into when you're first year of university and thinking about your career. You start taking up societies because you think it looks good on your resume, and you start paving out interests that you think are preferable to employers. And I guess the first step of something that kind of broke my mind a little bit, maybe people that realized this a lot earlier than I did, but if you just let your own interests naturally guide you towards doing things, no matter how random it seems, there is transferable skills from absolutely everything. So whether it be a sport or a random coding society because you're interested about artificial intelligence and you have no idea what it is, which is kind of how I was in that year, or you just dive down as many of these, and it doesn't have to be diversification of interest. I just happened upon that because I think I get interested in a bunch of stuff. But whatever it is, don't do it because you think it's the right thing to do. So I think that's the first thing that happened. And then you're right, everyone around me is looking at, the natural path is biotechnology or going into the medical field. And I was interested in that, and I started with an internship at a biotech company, but I kind of stumbled across it at a careers event at UCL. A lot of universities will have these in the first year. And, I said to them, which is maybe the wrong thing to say when you're going into a biotech with a scientific background. I said, well, look, to be honest, the science is really interesting to me, but I want to learn finance and business. And that's my, I'm just learning about this now, and that's what I want to focus on. And it just so happened that they were in this transition of writing the business plan and going through Series A investment. So I came into this company with exactly the right skill set that I wouldn't have known they were looking for in the job application. It was a scientific background in cell and gene therapy, and I would have had no idea that they wanted that. But I was just being very true to what I found myself being interested in, and it turned out in a really unique role. I was working alongside the CEO, writing the business plan, and ended up pitching to investors, and it was perfect. And I think sometimes it's going to sound weird and spiritual. It's coming from my mom's background, but sometimes the universe guides you towards an interest that is right, even though you don't know it at the time. So yeah, I think that's kind of what happened, if that makes sense.
So follow a feeling is what you're saying.
Yeah, for sure. And, it was a weird time because everyone was, not really thinking about careers so much in that first year. I think it's different when you look at the economics subjects. People are very focused on spring weeks in the first year. And I had to kind of discover that, and societies, again, helped me a lot with that. We can talk about that in a bit. But no one was really thinking about it yet. And so I remember distinctly my friends were a bit confused. It was first years in student halls, and it was still COVID when I joined university. So there was a lot of time on our hands to try and get involved in stuff, but a lot of it was over Zoom. And I was just obsessed with looking at these different career paths, and particularly in finance. And I remember my friends being like, what are you doing? What even is this? So yeah, I think don't be afraid to follow that feeling of what you think is interesting.
It was interesting because I was telling these guys I'm reading Shoe Dog again at the moment. Have you read it?
Yeah, I love that book.
And what I find interesting about Shoe Dog is that he talks about, in detail how he builds this company and goes public, Nike. So for those that don't know, Shoe Dog is the memoirs of the Nike co-founder, Phil Knight. And yeah, in the end, he says, just follow a feeling. All he was ever doing was following a feeling. So it's funny how you have that scientific background and yet you have this like spiritual determinist mindset as well. How did the two come together?
Yeah, that definitely comes a lot from my mom and how she raised me to think about that. I was joking a little bit before we went live that something I took from what she told me were the two main things, were meditation and visualization. So creating visualization boards and always having in mind, and it doesn't have to be, when you're doing that, a specific like, oh, I want to have this job at this company. Could be that, but it could also be a general theme, and you can follow certain themes in your life and it lead you down different directions. And yeah, I would say that's kind of how I started this follow a feeling idea. I probably didn't realize it at the time, but it worked out really well for me, especially as I think it's difficult sometimes for people to break through into university and careers when they haven't had that upbringing of always having it in mind. I think once you get to university, you see a lot of families have brought up their kids, really pushing them into a certain career path or a certain degree even. And I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing, but I certainly didn't have that. My parents were actually against university. It was a huge risk for me to even do it because I was brought up with my mom saying that you should be working, as soon as you finish school, you need to go into a job and you build yourself up that way. And that's how you live life. And so I think if you're brought up not thinking about careers in university and studying in that way, it can be difficult to break through that mentality of, oh, I just need to go to work, or I just need to, find a way in life, as my parents are telling me. So, yeah.
Wow. And visualization and meditation, we're going a bit off topic, but it's super interesting to me because, sometimes the most important thing of like even having the podcast is to kind of just drill into someone's mind and see what drives them, because for the audience, and you'll hear it in a bit, like Stephanie's one of the most successful people I know with like career success and stuff, applications, and she's worked at like the best places, and we can talk about all that, but I just want to know sort of which is why I keep asking about like what drives you and like on your career journey, but like the visualization stuff. See, I've tried it as well for like the past few years.
Manifestation
Less so. See, I'm still learning. For me, someone who I really respect once told me to like write down your goals on a place that you can see it every single day. And so you guys have obviously all been in my house. You've probably seen some on like mirrors and stuff, I've written down goals and like the things I want to achieve this year. And so I stuck to that. And it's not always like a 100% hit rate where, I achieve everything I write on that wall, but I get really close, I found. And it's crazy to me. Like I write down 3 things and I get like 2 out of 3 usually at the end of the year. And it's been like just incredible watching that. And so I think there is something to it, and I can't quite explain it. How do you practice, these things? Is it like, your mom told you growing up to like visualize things, manifest things? Because I mean, there's 2 schools of thought, right? The first is like you like visualize it, and it does nothing, or it never sort of like, it's just like a useless exercise. Like that could be one way to look at it. Like, what's the point of visualizing it? It's not going to bring it to life. But there's this like recent school of thought about like manifestation, where it's like just thinking and feeling and sort of at the law of attraction kind of might actually lead to that thing that you so passionately want manifesting in the real world. It's all like super spiritual, but I mean, where do you sort of draw the line, and what is your approach to this? Because you also mentioned meditation.
Yeah, I think it can be difficult because I find myself always in these 2 positions. One is, okay, you have to be really realistic and think scientifically, and that doesn't always hold true for when I think about visualization. And then there's this other part of, okay, you are a spiritual being and the universe guides you, and these are very far away from each other. And I think 100% agree what you say about the 2 schools of thought. I think sometimes people can say, okay, it's not that you're visualizing and that's coming about because you put it out into the universe and the law of attraction works. It's because you have stated what you're looking to achieve and you have a clear goal, and now you're subconsciously acting towards achieving that goal. And that's a little bit more realistic. Personally, I think if you want to go 100% on the realism point of view or 100% on the spiritual point of view, you're reaching the same conclusion, which is you're acting towards a goal. And I think that it doesn't matter which way you think about it. I think as long as what you've done is you've highlighted what you're hoping to achieve, and if you act towards that, or if things are shifting beyond your control that are making that happen for you, either way, it's a good thing. And sometimes I just kind of decide to let go of what's driving it and just keep putting in the practice. And it's definitely worked for me. And sometimes I think it's too spookily effective to just be my own path that I'm working towards. There's weird stuff happens when you really think about what you're looking to do and putting it out there. And some people, I think, are better at writing like a list of what they're looking to achieve, and some people, like myself, are very visual. And so putting together like something as simple as a Pinterest board, and I set it as my home screen on my computer. Every year I update it, and every time I'm not even thinking about, okay, I'm looking at all the things that I want to achieve, but it's just there and I'm constantly looking at it. And so I think that subconsciously breaks through. And it also works on these limiting beliefs that you have through childhood. You start forming limiting beliefs and you go, okay, I've been told that I'm this, or I've been told I'm not a hard worker at school, so I can't go on and be successful. And if you start painting a picture of a person that you view as successful and you start seeing that as yourself, you are, I think, breaking through those limiting beliefs. And as simple of an exercise as it is, I think it's incredibly effective.